I'm a little late, but I'm still getting it to you. Episode 85 of Enemy of the States, Dank Podstash, is a combo episode with Jeremy Harding of Jeremiah Talks YouTube. We streamed this one live last Sunday if you were able to catch it. If not, you're catching it now. So before we get started, let me give a super big thank you to Dank's Podstash super supporters, Maxwell, Dave, and Dennis. You guys keep us running. The Dank Podstash is also officially sponsored by Project Sparta. It's time to get hashtag Boogaloo ready and in fighting shape. Greg Papanikolaou is going to get you there with personalized meal plans, training, group support, and tons of amazing fitness and motivational resources and knowledge, including the Project Sparta Facebook group. You can go to projectspartacoaching.com and learn more about Greg's work and get started on your path to health. Don't be that person that only sits and talks about change, whether it's your health or even the Boogaloo. Get up, start learning, drilling, and training. One of the most important parts of prepping, no matter what for, is your physical health. Get to projectspartacoaching.com now and get after it. Special shout out to Voluntary Apothecary. Voluntary Apothecary was kind enough to send me a sample care package full of awesome beard care products, including beard oil, mustache wax, combs, and more. You can check out their amazing products at tashtamer.com and voluntарyapothecary.com. The Dank Podstash is teaming up with Road to Anarchy for a monthly newsletter and more. Road to Anarchy is an online magazine connecting groups of voluntary individuals who are looking to increase their freedom from the state. Becoming more self-reliant and developing a better focus on becoming a productive individual is the only mission. The only division is against the state. No matter your flavor of anarchy, finding your road to anarchy is the first step to progress. The time is now to put our individual differences aside, join up, and create change. You can go to roadtoanarchy.com to sign up for the monthly zine or to patreon.com/thedankpodstash and get signed up with any tier of support. Check out the Road to Anarchy Facebook page and groups to connect with other individuals on the road to anarchy. Where is your road taking you? Shout out to Anarchy Radio. Join Anarcho DJ Phoenix for Friday night Super Jams. All music, all night, starting at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. Saturday mornings, interviews starting at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And news and opinions starting Mondays at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can find Anarchy Radio live on the Float app, and if you're a Dank Podstash patron, you can catch my Saturday morning Anarchy Radio interview on the Dank Podstash Patreon page. Now let's jump into Sunday's live stream with Jeremy Harding, episode 85 of Enemy of the States Dank Podstash right now.
Enemy of the state.
An enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state.
Dank Podstash.
You're listening to Enemy of the States Dank Podstash. Check out thedankpodstash.com to find every episode of the Dank Podstash, links to support the show via our BitBacker and Patreon, Dank Podstash merchandise, and much more. If you'd like to advertise on the Dank Podstash, email us at dankpodstash@gmail.com.
So I can see we already have somebody in the comments saying, what the hell is this? This is YouTube. It's a platform you use to make videos. You can do streams like we're doing right now. It's one of the few places on the internet where you can really speak your mind, as long as you speak within the confines of the CIA-controlled dichotomy. So just because you needed to know that, there's your explanation. This is YouTube. Welcome.
Let me say, too, you know damn well what it is, Nick Texaco, you son of a gun. I know who you are.
So we're in person again because fuck the feds. This is a stream that I'll be posting. Let me check the audio real quick. Yep. All right. So let me post this to Facebook. You can deal us in, introduce yourself for anybody who might not already know you. This is Nick Irwin. He does the Dank Podstash.
What up? Also, hashtag non-voting Nick. You can see everything Enemy of the States Dank Podstash if you click that hashtag wherever you find it.
So on that score, first off, let's talk about some local stuff. there was a woman who posted a thing, and she claimed that she was satisfied with the results, even though she got absolutely bombed with a bunch of hate. That is, when they weren't actively deleting that. It was this woman named, I actually forget her name right now, but Stronger Together Spokane. And she
Karen. Karen was her name.
Yeah, Karen was her name. We'll call her Karen. And she did this stupid video where she was confessing to having called the cops on a bunch of people who didn't deserve it because they were going to church and shit.
Tag them in the post too, her live post.
So if you want to, you can find that video. I'm going to be posting it in my Keybase server as a full download, and you can mock that woman because she thought she would be slick, and she thought she would delete it and it would go away forever. But the internet is what's forever. So feel free to get Keybase and to join me on Keybase in order to get access to that particular video, because there's going to be a lot of stuff like that happening where people take their stupid Karen things down, or when YouTube takes something down inconvenient to their narrative. I have the interview with the doctors from California. In my YouTube, I have the Wolfgang Wodarg interview in case they take that down. I have this scene from the Dead Zone where they go over the coronavirus from China and how like the social distancing was going to be necessary and PPE and all this stuff. That was in 2003. There's a whole lot of just interesting little coincidences that I think are interesting. So feel free to check that out. And with that in mind, this is the second stream we were going to talk about. Let's get started with Amash. Why don't you, first off, we have to mourn because we lost liberty forever. Now that Amash is no longer there, and the Libertarian Party lost its, quote, legitimacy, we've lost it forever. There's no more legitimacy. It's all gone. So with that in mind, please just a moment of silence for the liberty we lost since Justin Amash decided to step down from his throne. Here's the moment of silence. Oh, never mind. So why don't, you call yourself non-voting Nick? What was the start of that, and why are you not changing, you monster?
Well, the start of being called non-voting Nick was another libertarian presidential hopeful, Ben Letter, who was doing a lot of live videos and had a taxation is theft kind of road sign up on the wall behind him. And so I decided I would, bug him about that, troll him until he took it down because he was full of shit. He wasn't against taxation. And he ended up naming me non-voting Nick. Why don't we just call you non-voting Nick? I'm like, okay. And I ran with it. And points of note here. He said the taxation is theft sign wasn't his. He was holding it for a friend. So that was great. And then he ended up taking it down too. It was really good. That was a good fun time in my life when I was dubbed non-voting Nick. Yeah, I think it's just a good name to get behind because I haven't voted. I don't vote and will not ever vote in anything political. I will vote for what kind of pizza I get with my friends, that kind of stuff, as is the trope.
Yeah, my last vote was for Ron Paul, so that should tell you something. And like that, I mean, in terms of actual people, though, I think last time I voted, it was because I was doing my mother a solid and like voting on some local like blah blah, but that was like many years ago, like 6 or 7 maybe, and it was during a presidential election, and so she said, well, then just write somebody in. So I wrote in Sonic the Hedgehog, and I might consider doing that again just to fuck with people. But
I know Harambe gained some steam for a while there. I want to see if people keep writing in Harambe.
Yeah. Well, so okay, so why don't we say this? If you were going to vote, who's the closest?
Okay, so I got asked that the other day in a was it the Road to Anarchy group? Someone posted, if you had to vote, who would you vote for, Libertarian or Green Party? And it's like, okay, well, I fucking wouldn't vote for the Green Party for any reason. And if it was Libertarian, it would be Vermin Supreme. And little did I know this person actually was interested in advice on who to vote for. So then I got booty hurt. I was like, don't fucking vote. But Vermin Supreme would be, I don't know, he's funny. He's throwing some gas on the fire that is the dumpster fire that is the Libertarian Party right now. Mm-hmm. And I consider his VP, Spike Cohen, a good friend. So they're interesting. I wish they weren't going about it, on a political platform. I don't know. It's just not my route. But if it gets people further along the road to anarchy or whatever, fine.
Yeah, well, and see, that's the thing. Like, in terms, if you want to talk serious people, before he was affiliated with Kokesh, I was all about McAfee. McAfee, it was one of the only ones willing to say taxation is theft, war is murder, all that stuff. He was all about, like, very strict anarchist messaging, and he's also all about, like, cryptocurrency. So I was a pretty big fan of that. But Finian in chat says, I thought Vermin was a hardcore socialist.
As in, he's going to force you to take free ponies, and he's going to take all your guns and give you better guns, from what I've heard. I don't know. I've heard he's identifies as an ANCOM, but I don't know. I think he's just a troll. Who fucking cares?
And like that's sort of the point. I think the whole if he's not actually going to use force, I don't care if he's a socialist. If his position is anarcho-socialism, then he's fine by me, or like libertarian socialism, as long as it's not one of those socialisms that requires like a massive governmental structure. I think it's no worse than any other quote socialism in the Libertarian Party. By the way, before we get too far into this, I was distracted by making jokes about this is YouTube, but I forgot to say this is brought to you by Liberty Professionals, who will help you secure your home, small business, and life. It's run by a residential security expert who's an ACES board certified physical security professional. And if you need work done in the Virginia area, they do missing persons investigations, skip tracing, and more. Contact them for more info. Finian has all the necessary tools in his toolbox to bring you peace of mind and stability for the future. Support Liberty businesses and these streams by heading over to libertyprofessionals.com to get your consult today. Also, feel free to find Liberty Professionals on social media for posts specifically just about securing your life. They do very small posts about like general tips and tricks occasionally, so feel free to give them a follow, especially on Float. But all that being said, let's get into some of the meat of what we were going to discuss today. So the first thing is, I think you're the reason I knew about that local Karen. So care talking about that a little?
I don't remember how I stumbled on that. I think I can't remember who it was. Somebody posted it, and I just started watching the video with my morning coffee and becoming furious because she tagged the local or the county sheriff. I think Spokane County Sheriff, Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington, and then the multiple pastors of the church that she was trying to rat out. And it was like, fuck, she was like Gestapo something, like the way she was listing off all their infractions. And it's like, we have been watching you. And like, I don't know if they had set up their own cameras or what, but they were watching and counting the number of people at services. And this was further back towards the beginning of the shutdowns and whatnot, and was just so smug and happy with herself for having, watched these people and now trying to rat them out publicly and just getting flamed in the comments. Absolutely flamed.
Yeah, and then she deleted her videos, so that'll be in the server. Join the Insane Asylum on Keybase. Discord kicked me for trying to get pedos banned from social media platforms, but all that stuff. Okay, so before we get too deep into anything, let's talk about specifically the subject that we were discussing right before we started this, which is the hesitance of the libertarian quote movement to take criticism. You were mentioning that you saw beef this morning between a couple people.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to get into names and stuff because it's done and over with. But yeah, there was just random, internet drama, shit that I try to stay out of now. But this one was pretty funny.
Yeah, because, well, I'm not going to mention names either, because, I mean, I think they blocked each other anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, like, somebody may have or may not have been joking about how Asian women look like little boys. And somebody else thought that that was completely serious and decided to make posts about it. And a bunch of people jumped in on that, I think, to needle the same person. But, like, generally speaking, this sort of thing happens a lot where somebody tries to call out what they think is actually a problem and is sort of battered by negative responses. A good example of that recently was something you wanted to talk about, which was the whole pedo situation. And that is where I rightly called out a pedophile who was running a server primarily populated by pedophiles to discuss how they liked their children, like they liked their steak, and like I caught a bunch of flack for that. So I wanted to ask you specifically, have you ever caught flack for like calling anything out in Liberty, and what was it?
Oh, Jesus. Well, voting. That's one thing I've gotten called out for. Talking about rights is always something that I get flack for. Because I think rights are social constructs. I don't think they exist other than in the minds of humans. Morality, subjective versus objective morality. I don't know, the usual stuff. And abortion. Definitely, that's one. Mostly calling out people who are calling for violence on abortionists and women who get abortions. I've gotten flack for that as well. The usual shit that gets people riled up.
Well, that's an interesting inroad. Let's talk about morality for a moment. What about morality is subjective?
I think people have their own moral codes that they go from. We had this conversation for hours one time a long time ago, and I still haven't dived into it as deeply as I'd like to. But I like the example that there's no morality fairy, for lack of a better term. There's nothing that's going to punish you outside of interpersonal interactions if you step on someone, or if you violate someone else's moral code, or you don't follow how they think you should be moral.
Right. Well, okay. So, are you saying that there's no morality because there's no consequence?
No, I don't think there's just one morality, is what I'm saying. I think people have different ideas of what is and is not moral, as we see every day with all the shit I just listed that I get flack for, like abortion, for example.
Gotcha. Well, so okay, because that's an interesting. I struggle with the concept that there's not some sort of like standardization for what makes something right and what makes something wrong. I don't necessarily think I know the best standard, but I would say that like moving toward a general standard of like, harm reduction or, most good for the most people, or simply just defending the negative right to not be trodden on, that sort of thing. I would say that those things are generally moving toward a single standard that we just don't understand fully yet. I think
that could be.
I think like the human brain is like a squishy, meaty thing, and it's not a great computer.
Well, it's like you're saying, moving towards that standard.
Yeah,
yeah. And people are saying there is one standard, period. And yet everyone has a different interpretation of it. Everyone, inserts their own code on what they think the standard is, and then everybody gets in fights about it. But
yeah. Well, and especially when that code is attached to a god.
Right.
Like, I mean, if your argument is that something is or isn't moral because of some sort of logical argument, that makes a lot less potential for conflict than cops themselves. Or, sorry, cops, whatever, God themselves. Basically, cops.
Freudian slip.
And so, like, well, yeah, I've been reading a lot of Nietzsche lately, and, it's all about, like, killing your individual censors. So, I sort of think cops and gods are on a similar scale. Like Larkin Rose says, the most dangerous superstition. So I guess probably, a little bit of a Freudian slip. But but like gods, like what makes your god better than my god?
Right.
Why is this immoral because something that you can't prove exists says it is?
Right.
That sort of thing. It's an interesting subject.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. That's another hotbed of arguments is atheism versus theism and whatnot, and it just doesn't. There's no need to be arguing that anyways. I don't give a fuck if someone wants to follow a religion, and just because I don't doesn't mean I need to flame them or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's, I think it's an interesting thing, because when you start talking about religion, a lot of people, they don't want a personal walk with somebody. They want, like, this is the standard now, and if you disagree, convert or die kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is the standard now. If you don't agree, you deserve eternal punishment. This is the standard now. If you don't agree, we're going to force you to act as though you agree. That sort of thing. It's a very interesting way to look at the world, to say the least.
There's a interesting question that popped up. Decadude says, "What do you all think of Bo the Fifth Column and his followers?" I had a short conversation about some of his stuff lately, but I haven't watched any of it for quite a while. I had him on my friends list for a bit and tried to get him on the pod stash, and that didn't pan out. He didn't want to come on, and then unfriended me for some reason. I don't know. He seemed reasonable at first, but I've heard he's kind of gone off the rails, and now him and his followers just attack whoever disagrees with him in the comments. And take that as you will, because it's secondhand. I haven't looked into it.
Well, I see. The thing is that started to irk me a little is I used to write a few articles for the Fifth Column News, and they used to be interested in having, like, a really wide variety of perspectives. Now it seems that the site is only him, and that's an interesting approach, I guess, where you start a site and have a bunch of people involved, and then eventually boil it down to one person, but it does seem kind of counterintuitive to its initial point. I'll say that. And, like, I sort of, I didn't watch his videos really, and then when I did watch his videos, the takes he was making seemed relatively close to normie. So I think, like, I would rather watch somebody like Philip DeFranco if I'm gonna look for that kind of take, personally. I don't necessarily have a problem with him, but I don't necessarily think he's, like, the best YouTuber ever. I mean, I'm not the best YouTuber ever. I'm an asshole. I'm abrasive. Most people don't want to talk to me because I'm incredibly negative. I'm the most negative, aggressively negative person on Liberty Twitter. I still like that somebody called me that right before blocking me and telling me to get help. But, like, I think I don't necessarily have a problem with him, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend his content to the average person either.
I'd start earlier if you were going to watch it. I think, as with a lot of people, this whole COVID thing and lockdowns and all that kind of threw him off the rails in some of his principles that he had before. That's what it sounds like to me. But this is springtime up here by Spokane, so I'm kind of out of the loop on a lot of stuff. I was up on a mountain yesterday working on the garden most days and working and shit. So, yeah, you're going to find that I'm a little not knowledgeable on some of the current events that come up.
Right. Well, and like, I try not to throw too much shade at people who aren't doing a bad thing, and it doesn't seem like he's doing a bad thing. I just, I would rather not.
Well, he's just speaking out with what he thinks is right. So,
yeah,
there's no reason to get all butthurt just because somebody has a different opinion than you.
Well, I mean, it depends on the opinion. I mean, if we're talking, like,
Sure.
Being a Nazi, a tanky, saying that it's the drug war is great, or that mass interrogation or intelligence is good, or pedophilia, I think we can make safe assumptions that certain opinions are detestable, but he doesn't, I don't think, espouse any of those.
Reasonable opinions.
Yeah, there
Reasonable.
we go. Like, if I want to, because the thing is, like, if I want takes from I guess an edgier edge, I'll probably go with somebody like Corbett, because, like, you can watch his stuff for a lot of information dense shit, and, like, when Corbett talks, which he does regularly, he includes all his sources. Like, he puts them on the screen. He includes proof for his claims, which a lot of other people don't, and he's relatively calm. Like, I catch flack for being angry about shit and for being negative. He does not do the same thing I do. He tries to like not be unappealing while still telling the truth. He's not going for the whole edgy thing. He's going for the, I'm going to try and just give you the facts thing. So I respect that if we're talking about like alternate takes. And I also like, if you want something that's not only entertaining but incredibly dark and highly informative, I can't recommend Truth Stream Media enough. So I mean, they're good people to follow. And like, if you want to talk more normie takes on stuff, but that's still information dense, and highly informative, Naomi Brockwell is good. Peter Quinones is good. And like Nick Irwin here has his own show, and I would highly recommend that over Bo. I mean, Bo has an audience, and I don't necessarily have a problem with him or his audience, but what I will say is I'm not gonna like recommend him over other people, if that answers your question.
Some people might be watching this on my show in the future with the time travel of YouTube right now too. Because this is a joint episode, but yeah, I get that too. And I like people who just lay out the facts when I am listening to stuff for the most part. When I'm making content, I enjoy speaking about others' opinions and having a long form conversation. So it's definitely different from the Dank Podstash stuff. But I don't know. I think conversation's important, whereas just having a video of maybe you and just your opinion with no facts is not as important, in my opinion. So
yeah, well, and like it opens it up to be like, well, if this is his series is called Let's Talk, I don't think I've ever heard him talk to anyone.
Right.
Like it'd be interesting if his Let's Talk series maybe had an audience engagement show, had something like where you could call in, or had like a conversation with a Discord on air, or ideally key-based, because Discord is run by people who are sympathetic to pedophiles. So
Facebook too also. Sorry to bust into your point there, but I wanted to mention Daniel Johnson, who I've had on the show and did Hot Tokes with me, caught a 30-day ban on all his profiles because of sharing a kill your local pedophile meme, like instantly.
Well, that's a shame.
So yeah, watch out, speaking out on Fedbook as well, as you know.
Wait, Daniel, if you can hear this, feel free to set up a keybase, because that's an encrypted chat. They're not going to ban you over that sort of thing.
He's there. He's in. I think he might be in just mine, but I'm not sure if he's in yours. Either way.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, if I'm sure you'll listen to this. Feel free to add me on there, and I'll add you to the Insane Asylum. We're about 140 people deep at this point. So you're gonna have a nice insane time talking to a huge group of people and not being censored. And most of the people in there, and I say most because I don't necessarily know all of them like personally and perfectly, but generally you're not gonna get anybody sympathetic to pedos. So feel free to join my server, Daniel.
Let's go to when violence is acceptable, because I did want to talk about that, because that kind of plays off of what we were talking about with that Facebook drama this morning, maybe even Libertarian Party, all kinds of shit, and the situation right now. Because in that situation, there was a threat of flying from overseas to go beat someone's ass, internet tough guy stuff, and then sending people in the offender's area to go beat his ass over words. And we've talked about my hesitancy to embrace the nap before. And I think it's fine in its basics, the golden rule, based on the golden rule, that kind of thing, but I think sometimes it's fine to initiate, depending on the person and the situation.
Well, okay, so why don't you give a situation? Because I'm a pretty strict NAP guy, so maybe we could use this as like a bounce-off point.
Yeah, because I do want to talk about that too, because I had that discussion last night with some people as well, and I'm not quite sure exactly of the line for initiation if it hasn't been initiated against me, but I would think it would be to repel people that will be a problem, and a violent problem in one way or another. And what had me thinking about this was back when I was in a punk band, high school and right after, and our expulsion of Nazi punks and, pretty much, pedos and stuff. Because there are older people in punk scenes that prey on younger people in those scenes of both genders. And I've seen that happen, and they've got theirs. But you hear those rumors about someone and you can confirm them. I'm fine with tossing them out in any way that they get the fucking message.
Well, okay, so first off, I have very strong views on pedophiles. Lately, especially, I've been talking about it a lot because after exposing a pedophile trying to entryist into libertarianism, using libertarian and anarchist blah blah in order to justify it, I caught flack because not only did I expose this person, which people were calling doxing, which is a flat out lie. Not only did I catch flack for that, but I also caught flack for exposing their server, because this was after Discord banned me, and basically the idea was I still had moles we could still see in the server, and we could still see the members list. So all I had happen was my moles took pictures of the inside of the server, some of the things that were being said, like for instance giving somebody they thought to be 14 years old not safe for work permissions, and having this quote anarchist in the best friend role of the admin. And basically I caught a lot of flack because I exposed the entire members list, and because guilt by association blah blah instead of maybe accountability, and maybe you shouldn't be in this fucking server. But all that, like, because what am I supposed to do? Like, talk to them in individually, like set up a burner Discord so that I can talk to them individually and say, hey, this server is hugely toxic and bordering on illegal, but not quite there yet. Talking about like what kinds of kids they like to fuck, and basically like it's a pretty bad look to be in here. So why are you in here? So like, what was if I did that and they weren't, they might have left. But if I did that and they were serious about this and they were in there for that purpose, they could have just said to everyone there to sanitize the joint. So like, I think I made the right choice by just exposing the server list. But I have a video on here right now that's 40 downvotes at 65% disliked. So if y'all want to go over there and thumbs up that video, feel free. But basically, like, the notion is that, like, I think pedophiles plan to and then actively engage in exploitation of children. And I think that means that you can't really initiate force on a pedophile who's not trying to change. If a pedophile is actively trying to go after a child, that's going to result in it. And it's sort of like pointing a gun at people, you gotta move the gun away. Even if you don't have to wait till the metal hits somebody to prevent somebody from getting shot.
Yeah, and I would ask, it sounds like you found evidence of the stuff that you find to be the line. I don't know. I don't have any interest in looking further into that. If someone is open about it, I guess, whether or not they're aggressing, I'm not interested in keeping them around, and I'll use force to get rid of them.
Well, absolutely. But that's the sort of thing. Like, so a bunch of people were mad at me. They claimed I was lying, even though they couldn't prove it. And then they lied a bunch about me because that's what my detractors do. They lie all the time. You've seen it. So basically, like, the whole thing involved with that, I had all the proof. I had all the proof I needed, but they still didn't believe it. So I went on a stream the other day with the Metalhead Doomer and talked directly to the pedophile who was in charge of the server, and what he said. And I don't know if I believe him yet or not, but what he said is that he's in therapy, trying to live more healthily and trying to make better choices, because I firmly believe pedophilia is a choice. So, if somebody is trying to change, if somebody is trying to be better, then I'm all for letting them become better. Because I could have swung hard the opposite direction of anarchy when I was a kid. I was a dumb kid. I believed basically in genocide. I wanted to glass Iran. I wanted to nuke every place that had potential, quote, terrorists in it. And I supported Bush, Guantanamo, all that stuff. I was basically like just an inch away from becoming a white supremacist. And now I'm an anarchist who pisses off white supremacists of all stripes and who actively gets shat on by alt-rightists. So I think it's possible to make better choices. And I certainly, and this is one of my more controversial things, if I had become a genocidal person and used that as an excuse to, for instance, join the military, which was very easily accessible in my area, and I had great ASVAB scores, they would have taken me anytime I fucking wanted. If I had joined the military and started to kill a bunch of innocent people, I would have been worse than this pedophile running a simple Discord server by miles. So the whole, I think things have degrees.
Right. Well, this reminds me of, I want to say last year at some point, I think around the time with that piece of shit Sean Windingland or whatever his name was, posting the video, is him asking his children about their consent to do sexual things with them.
They were like 7, 9.
It was disgusting. It was horrible. I can't believe that. I don't know. It was shocking to see that when it went up. But there was a huge fucking rift and argument about what's to be done with people like this and rehabilitation, or no, you can't shoot all pedophiles, all kinds of different fucking shit. And I remember one thing specifically was a study that someone brought up, and it was like less than 2% of people who seek help ever see any positive change. And I'm sure there's more studies that I haven't looked into and stuff, but if those are the numbers, I'm not interested.
Well, because that's part of the thing, is that a lot of these studies, I would have to see that one specifically. A lot of these studies don't talk about the potential outliers. They don't talk about the fact that a lot of people who might be seeking help might not be seeking it in a clinical environment, or in a clinical environment that does data sharing. So I don't know. There's a potential there that you're right about that, and that there's almost no hope. But I'm willing to give people a shot. Although people now know what this person looks like because they posted their face. People have this person's images downloaded. So they're on notice. If something does happen, there's very low likelihood something won't have negative consequences in that regard. But
let's jump to the other side of stuff. From just my experience, was one with people fucking with underage children, and the other one was the Nazi punks.
Right. And
because obviously everybody calls everybody else a fucking Nazi or commie or whatever nowadays. And so I don't think it's legitimate in 90% of cases. Even people walking around with a fucking swastika armband or something is probably just a moron and not actually wanting to kill whoever Nazis wanted to kill in mass, But I remember back in those days at shows and whatnot, if somebody showed up with their leather jacket with the red shoulder, or with the red arm and red laces, red braces, and all that shit, they left or they got their ass beat because we didn't want them in our community. And that happened multiple times, and I was okay with that too.
Well, that's an interesting thing, though, because first off, when you have that swastika on, you're talking political affiliation. If we're talking about an actual war, which is what a lot of these Nazis claim to want, in war, you see somebody in an enemy uniform, you gun them down, right? I think if these people truly want a war, they should be prepared at the very least for a concert that doesn't go well for them, and if they don't want a war, maybe they shouldn't have a war symbol on their arm.
Right.
So yeah. I don't know that that's even, initiatory violence there either. I think they went there with fighting words on their arms, and they, posed a significant threat intentionally to prove that they posed a threat, and that they, if what you're saying is like completely 100% true, they got exactly what they were asking for.
Right, and they were asking for it because usually it was just to start shit. Like, I don't see why anybody in Nazi punk bands or those circles would go to a regular show if there was not one of their bands playing or anything and expect anything else. And yeah, I would, it's not like you just walk up and punch them generally. Generally, you warn them to get out. Sometimes people talk to them, whatever, and it's the same everywhere when you see people, repping that stuff. Generally talk to them, but at a certain point, I'm tired of talking to them. And whatever.
And at a certain point, I mean, their speech is almost always, if they're a Nazi specifically, their speech is almost always directly related to what Hitler did.
Sure.
And that, maybe Hitler should do it again, or we should get another Hitler, or whatever, blah, blah. That sort of bullshit. So, I mean, if that's the case, then I think they made it very clear what they're intending to do. If somebody says, I have a missile in my wheat silo, and I'm going to launch that and kill an entire town, and they're just using words, but they're also using words to demonstrate a credible threat. And I think a credible threat is an act of aggression. If I don't have a missile in my wheat silo, if I don't even have a wheat silo, but I say I have a missile in my wheat silo, it wouldn't be the same thing as if you knew somebody did, and if you stopped them before they got home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then this even goes further to what the the helicopter memers, the fuck are those guys, the Pinochet guys, the
Hoppy and Snake memes.
Hoppy and Snake memes, Pinochet guys, all that stuff.
Who've probably never read Hoppa.
Sure, and they like to say it's preemptive defense or whatever the fuck that means, to throw commies from helicopters and shit like that. And I get if you see a group of people gearing up to come after you, but to just want to go pick up people who have a different ideology than you and throw them out of a helicopter, I think it's different. It's a big complicated thing.
Well, also, first off, Nazism, there is no such thing as an anarcho-Nazi.
Right.
There is a such thing as an anarcho-communist because there is a potential for a stateless way to do that. National Socialism has zero stateless potential. Zero. So I think it's a little different there. Because when they talk about helicoptering all commies, they're including perfectly peaceful communists. There's no such thing as a peaceful Nazi. So by that token, first off, it's always interesting that they use the helicopter in Pinochet in general, because Pinochet was a CIA paid operative for the United States and their foreign policy. And if we're talking specifically here, Pinochet was not only a statist and a totalitarian, but one directly supported by the U.S. government. And that's the reason he got the choppers. That's all this stuff, because basically he had support from megastates. So it's always interesting when these people try to claim that they're anarchist or libertarian, using the same symbology and argumentation and alleged methods of doing this sort of thing that the CIA paid dictators would. Because in doing so, I think they really tipped their hand in that regard. Like, we're talking about genocide, basically.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to hit on another comment from Decadude. He says, the thing is, if you support violent actions and it's justified in using violence against them, this would apply to all statists, since all the laws they support are death threats. Yeah, that's an interesting one that I've had a lot of talks about. And I think it's a little different since they're not the ones carrying them out, and they're just engaging in the completely useless act of voting.
See, I'm probably more extreme in this regard, but my approach is probably still relatively similar to yours. My general idea is, yes, they are on a similar level of threatening violence for compulsory actions, right? But I'm trying to convince them. I'm trying for a mass uprising and an awakening of consciousness. You can't do that by killing, like, literally everybody. You can't do that by harming huge groups of people who aren't out being actively aggressive. You can't do that like to the masses that you're trying to change and expect them to change to your side. You can only do that and, hope to be able to reap some of the chaos from the terror you inflicted. I don't want to become a terrorist.
I think too, one important thing here is if you consider voting violence or not. And if voting, and not even if you consider it, if voting actually is violence. And I don't consider it violence, and I don't think it is violence. I think it's useless. I think you're begging for something, and the government's gonna do whatever they want to do anyways.
Right.
Despite how you vote. The example I use every time is here in Washington State, and there are many other examples. It's just this one's close to me, but there's no state income tax, right? And people have been supposedly voting it down for 85 years. And recently they're getting tired of people voting it down and considering a closed door, late night meeting with no public vote to install an income tax. And it's like, you're not doing anything with voting. It doesn't matter. And take legalization. Everyone gets always super butthurt when I say fuck voting for legalization. It's harm reduction. Is it? It's shifting harm from one thing to another. There's still fucking rules that you can be killed or go to jail for breaking. There's still massive taxation on that product now when there was not before in the black and gray markets. It's
can't get a gun.
Exactly. All kinds of shit. It's just completely useless. They're not out there putting a gun to your head saying follow these laws that I'm voting for. The laws, they don't even know what's in them all the way. The people that are making the laws, writing these bills and whatnot, and hiding all the bullshit in them, I would consider them aggressors, and I would consider the people who enforce them aggressors.
See, and the thing is, right now we have basically a system of delegation. We have a lazy system whereby the common person says, I'm going to write down who I want to do this for me. It's not a matter of individual action. It's not a matter of getting off your ass and doing it yourself. It's a matter of delegation. It's a matter of removal of responsibility from you to somebody else. The difference between that and, say, a Nazi is a Nazi directly wants to cleanse themselves. They want to go out there and kill minorities themselves. That is violent on a personal level. So, first off, again, the whole uniform thing. Again, the whole war thing. These people think they're at war already, which is why they're going in with military armbands. So I think that changes it. And then I think it also changes it a bit, the fact that these people specifically follow an ideology which demands that they partake in the violence because these people are Untermenschen, we need to get rid of them, So I would say it's strongly different in that regard. And to answer your question, Jason, if we're talking action being the trigger, shouldn't teachers be targeted then? I would say no, especially since a lot of children are practically raised by their teachers. And if you want children to think martyrdom, that's what you do. If you want to increase the indoctrination, you don't target the people who are actively going out and being violent. You go out and target the people who children might actually love.
Also on that too, at least for now, in maybe not every place, I'm not sure of anywhere outside of where I've been for the most part, it's a choice to send your kid to public school or not.
Yeah.
And if it ever becomes, if there's ever not a choice and they're going to violently force you to, then fuck it, take everybody out who's supporting that system.
So, Finian says, it's pretty genius on the part of the rulers between order followers and voters, people like them who have no problems having others do their dirty work. The system mostly works in the ruler's favor. They figured out human psychology and are exploiting it to the max. Yes, and that's what the MK programs were. They were specifically designed to break into the human mind and manipulate it to their ends. So that should tell you something in that regard. That it was all about we have to end violence, and that was the excuse for starting the program. And then it turned into, we have to be able to turn violence off and on like a switch. And now they've figured out how to turn violence off and on like a switch, and they can pretty much make people violent at their whim in order to, and they're very, very well testing that with social media, by the way. And they're very, they're very capable of making people violent for their ends and against their enemies. So that should tell you something on its own.
I was laughing because I saw Science's comment that y'all need to be voted on harder. Vote me harder, Daddy. Bring it.
Yeah.
I guess make me show where my line is. We'll see how that works out, I guess.
So to scroll up, the thing with people seeking help that stops most people from changing is the lack of desire to change. Yes, I agree. See, that's the thing, though. When I was on that stream with that pedophile, he specifically said he was trying to live a different life. And, you know, he's been posting a lot, and this is gross, but whatever. He's been posting a lot about being caged, which means that your dick is stuck in a cage that has a lock attached to it.
Fuck.
So, I mean, if he's that extreme about it, then, you know, fine. More power to him. Especially if he's doing what he also said he was doing, which we talked about briefly after the stream. I gave him some fitness and diet advice because I've seen pictures of him and his arms and legs are extremely thin. This person is malnourished, and that'll do fucked up shit to your head anyway. So he claims he was abused as a child. He claims he was in a bad mental space then, and he was malnourished. So all three of those will change you into a different person than you already were anyway. You know, but like, add to that the fact that he was living this massively unhealthy lifestyle, mostly indoors, not working out, not eating properly, not eating much at all, and that changes things a bit, you know? So I would say he does want to change, and he might be changing. Well, but I'll also say this. People are following him now. People have updates set up, and they're going to be tracking him. Basically, like, you know, whatever, an anarchist watch list, if you will. And there are going to be people monitoring it to make sure that his public presence doesn't get used for that sort of thing. So he'd have to hide again if he wanted to do these things the same way he was doing them before. He'd have to go back into hiding and this time not fuck up and leave a trail. So maybe he's not interested in actually changing. Maybe this is all a facade to just get the people to stop being mean to him. I don't know. But I'm willing to let him try because that's the thing about anarchy. If we're to succeed, we have to let them try. You know? We have to let people try to be better people because otherwise we might as well just say everybody's an Archon anyway. We might as well not try. You know? I mean, the whole point of anarchy is to try and convert people to your way of thinking so they act better.
I don't know how I feel about that, extending that to pedos. I get what you're saying, and fine, away from me, but coming into proximity with me would probably not be great.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the thing. He's going to have to be very careful now because people have seen his face, you know? I mean, it's harder to interact in public with that sort of thing hanging over your head. I'll put it that way.
Right. Yeah, that's a weird one. That was one of the arguments during that thing after the Sean Windingland thing. You know, if you persecute them, they're just going to go harder underground, and you won't know what they're doing, who they're abusing, because they're going to hide it better and better if all they're met with is threats of being killed versus rehabilitation.
Yeah, well, at least people see, that's the thing. I'm still all about the other solutions, and I don't care if somebody decides to take matters into their own hands. It doesn't actually, like, I'm going to speak the truth about people, and what people do with that information is up to them. But the whole idea that having a society of violence toward these people is a bad idea because they'll just go underground, it's better that way, and kids think it's not okay, than for them to be above ground and for kids to think it's perfectly normal and fine and not think that they have anybody to turn to when it does happen to them.
Right.
So, like, it might be, you know, maybe the incidences increase. I kind of doubt that because, like...
Yeah, I doubt it too. I think Finian made a good point too. Says that's the main reason they're so widespread online. They feel immortal and immune to consequences.
Yeah, because they can be anonymous.
Yep. Or, you know, picked up and shielded by the state.
Yeah, I mean, in this particular case, this person was hiding behind an alternative account that they created specifically for a stream where they were defending pedophilia, and theirs specifically. So, like, I mean, the fact that you can just do that you can just bloop and suddenly you're a different person, removes a lot of the accountability from the equation. I mean, the reason the Sean Windingland situation got dealt with so quickly was because he made the mistake of posting his face.
Fucking video. What
Yeah,
an idiot.
with children. You don't do that if you want to be quiet about it, which I'm not going to help anybody in that regard. You know, you want to dig
videos.
You want to dig your own grave, feel free, you know? Don't stop your enemy when they're making a mistake. But at the same time, like, you know, yeah, I don't care that there should be a culture of fear around these things. Like, by that same token, anarchy will never happen. And the reason I say that is because, like, the state exists now, and the only way to get anarchy would be to abolish the state, which means that if we want to get anarchy, if we want to abolish the state, we have to make an environment averse to it. And making the state unpopular so that states have to then exist underground would not result in more states, and is necessary to getting rid of the state. We've got to push it underground. We got to make freedom popular and being an archon unpopular. So by that same token, like, it's like saying if you make tyranny illegal, there will be more tyrants. No, there won't. There won't be more of something just because it's illegal. And they won't be able to get away with tyranny better just because it's under the cover of darkness. Like, eventually, people will find out and people will rout them out. But a society that is, like, susceptible to freedom, much less a society that actively encourages it, like an anarchist one, that's going to need to be averse to the state. It's going to need to say, don't rule other people, you know? No, don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. So that seems like the answer there.
Yeah, I like Konkin's description, his kind of reverse time travel in the New Libertarian Manifesto from small pockets of statism returning to the present, where statism was, in control of everything. I think thinking that the state's or statism in general is gonna go away completely is utopian, and that's not what we're going for. The people are still gonna choose it, minarchy or whatever, but it's the choice to be vigilant and protect your freedom outside of it as soon as you have the chance to grab it and keep it.
Right, yeah. Well, and also, like, being willing to restructure your own mind. Like, I was a stupid piece of shit when I was in high school, and it took me a long time to stop being a stupid piece of shit. Anybody can. It's a process, you know? Mm-hmm. I mean, clearly the people that just showed up in chat have no interest in not being a stupid piece of shit, which is why they're saying what they're saying. But, you know, I'm gonna take a picture of this, and I'm gonna post it, and I'm gonna say, you know, this is the kind of person that has no argument, because they absolutely don't. Like, we're specifically speaking truth, and they can't do anything but character assassinate.
I don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, Gavi, Chavez, I don't know why they're here. They were theoretically signing a peace pact or whatever in my DMs, but they were the person I got the most flack for exposing the server list over, because they were the person in that best friend role. So it's interesting at this point. So, I mean, you got to be willing to restructure your mind. You got to be willing to kill off the parts of it that don't serve freedom, that don't serve your own personal liberty.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much longer we're going to keep this going anyways, because if I'm going to post, we're going to be near the end of my recording limit as well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, with that in mind, I forget exactly what else we were going to discuss, but...
I don't know. We can take a little bit of time and do some Boogaloo stuff, maybe?
Yeah. Well, so, okay, I recently wrote an article on how to be a gray man, and I wanted to ask you maybe Have you ever looked into Gray Man?
No, yeah, just cursorily, because I was more interested in getting out away from places where I'd have to be a gray man and staying there. But I do recognize the value, if you're in a city or having to go through somewhere like that as well, which is another thing based on your research into being a gray man I wanted to ask, because that's a question that I've asked quite a bit with people I've had on the show lately is what the fuck are people in the city going to do when shit gets real bad besides leave?
Well, okay, so when you're in the city specifically, you have options, and one of the key things, and one of the reasons that the state wants to increase infliction of social distancing, is when you're closer in proximity to one another, facial recognition has a harder time picking you up. Additionally, it has a harder time analyzing your gait, your temperature, everything else. And that's one of the things. Like, they want us to socially distance so facial recognition can pick us out better. They want us in masks so that they can then scan our eye line and add that to their database and be able to query that. And they want to do all of this so that they can control us by way of completely contactless methods. Like, airports and all this stuff are getting contact-free checkpoints where you can just go through and your face scans as your ID. And that's how it's going to be everywhere. Everywhere is going to have some sort of smart camera, right? So, like, in the city, your options are somewhat limited in terms of getting out, but that's sort of the part of the thing, is that if you know how the city works, if you know how to get close to people and keep close to people, if you know how to blend in with a crowd and not stick out too much, if you know how to, scan for exits and entryways and, make sure you've got a line of sight on all potential spots for spies and snipers, that sort of thing. Little things can prevent you from being a target in that sort of thing. But like, it's not that much better in the country, because in the country, they don't have to worry about any sort of like flack for the most part from, just out and out violent action. Like, they burned down Dorner in a cabin in the woods. Waco, Ruby Ridge, all these places were relatively secluded, but they were still destroyed.
There was a large protest during the Ruby Ridge standoff, and I blame it not getting further at the time due to not having internet like we have now, because we see people showing up quickly to people who are out in these rural areas now, like Christopher Ledbetter, who I had on the show a couple episodes ago, was able to get people to him in rural Oklahoma when he needed them. But yeah, it's isolation. So my advice and advice I've received about being out in the country, if you don't have people around you immediately, is have a group ready to go to be there to help you. And then as far as in the city, the only thing I can think of is have a bug out plan to get out. Because I'm talking more collapse of one sort or another, more so than just the authoritarian state that we live in.
Well, see, here's the thing, though. Even in a collapsing environment, you would still do better to have some sort of proximity to people. Because there are too many fucking people on the planet. And the fact is that these people are going to, and I guarantee this, they're going to act violently. So if you have a bunch of people and they're going to act violently, then your goal needs to be to have some sort of auxiliary community. You need to be able to group with other people. You need to have some sort of organization, some structure. And you can't have that by going into the middle of nowhere and not doing anything.
Well, no, you have your group out there.
Right.
That's what it should be.
But in the city specifically, if you live there right now, most people, first off, who live in the city are poor. They don't have. I certainly don't have the money to bug out right now. So I mean, when you live in the city, your options are somewhat limited in that regard to begin with. But then you take the fact that like when you're in the city, you have a bunch of support networks. You have a bunch of people there who would be potentially interested in grouping up in a situation like this. You might have, if you got a charismatic enough leader, if you got, or if you've got a group structure that's that's communal enough, intentional enough, like intentional communities, you might have the ability to group up in a strong enough amount of people that living in the city would be an asset and not a liability, because you would be one group and you would stake out your territory and you would isolate it. So I mean, it depends on what you want. It like
And the situation, like Finian said too.
Yeah,
It depends on what's going down, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. The stuff I prepare for is collapse of infrastructure, whatever, that kind of shit, massive collapse. And I chose that because I also just want to live away from everyone and have a
Right.
strong community outside of a city anyways, so it dovetails together.
right. Well, and you know, that's sort of like you're not going to not be an extrovert when the collapse happens. You're not going to not be an introvert when the collapse happens. You're going to be whatever you were before then, only after a collapse has happened. The collapse isn't going to change you that much. So where you live pre-collapse is honestly probably where you should live post-collapse.
Sure.
And if that means trying to rebuild civilization quickly, trying to get everything back on track, then that's what you should do. You know, if you don't like people that much, or if you're an introvert, maybe don't live in the middle of a bunch of people to begin with. I mean, and you probably won't. So like, if you're already not an extrovert, you'll probably already have a place somewhere somewhat secluded, and that's honestly where your strengths probably are.
Yeah, I don't plan to bug out either, Finian, but I think it's a good plan to have just in case, no matter where you are,
Yeah.
outside of the city or in the city.
Right. And I was about to bring up the thing he also brought up, which is that everyone should live where bugging in is the plan, where you have enough to survive for a short bit while shit blows over. Because collapses are temporary. Like, the U.S., everybody acts like the U.S. is immortal. The U.S. has been here for a few hundred years, you know, under a few hundred years. The U.S. is young. The U.S. is a blip on the radar of human history, much less the history of the universe. Like, things will collapse. The colonies collapsed and then became the U.S. So, I mean, things are going to collapse. Things are going to reform. Everything's a remix. Nothing is permanent, and we're all going to die. So, ultimately, like, trying to find a way to, like, get the best solution post-collapse is probably the best choice.
I agree.
So, with that in mind, is there anything you would like to say before we call it?
No, just thanks for watching. That was fun. And this will be up on the Dank Podstash YouTube and all the podcatcher channels and whatnot in a few hours today for all the fans.
Yep. All right, sounds like a plan. Watch out. Watch out. The statists are out in force, and they are definitely not interested in peace. They're trying to control you. They're trying to prevent you from being close to each other, which is what humans need to be positive, to be healthy, to be successful. They don't like what we did here today because we're not social distancing at 6 feet apart. But we didn't hurt anybody. We're not hurt ourselves, except a little scratchy throat. But, you know, that's a separate issue. That's shitty human anatomy. They don't like us doing what we did today, but we didn't hurt anybody. And ultimately, we're talking about, like, anarchy, freedom. That's what we need. We need to stand up for what we have the right to do. And ultimately, if it doesn't hurt anybody, if there's no victim, there's no crime. And you should never let yourself be controlled by people who insist otherwise. So smash the state, get out there, and fuck some shit up.
Total freedom, no exceptions.
Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash is sponsored by Project Sparta. Go to projectspartacoaching.com to learn more.